And welcome back to the next part of this painting. Okay, so today is just all about nitpicky stuff. So I have this nice brown that I've already mixed up for the whole, like all the rusty parts, the base for the rusty parts. So I'm gonna just use that today, and I'm just gonna kind of run around this and pick out a bunch of things, probably mostly in the wheel today, and just kind of get the base of the rust down where I can. So in some instances, like the yellow, where there was, I think whether that's primer or that was the color on the forks, I can't really tell. It looks like it was maybe some sort of paint or primer, and then it's worn through in these rusty spots. But in any event, I painted the yellow first because the brown's going to cover that a little bit better. So I did that in the last one. All right, let's get going. So let me clean this up a little bit. I've also, you can't see it, it's off the side, but I've brought over my handy dandy paint mixer, which is really nice. It's a actually a tiny little test tube mixer. That's what you're hearing off the side, but it really does a great job at mixing up the paint. Okay. Now remember, this is 100%, so there's no additives in this yet. So I'm going to add just a few drops because I don't want it to, you see how thick it is. I don't want to mix up too much of this and then not go bad, but I'd rather run out of it. So what I'm going to use to thin this, since it is really thick, is the 10-to-1 mix. I've been using this 1-to-10 mix a lot. It works really, really well for a lot of different applications. And again, it's 1 part 4050 UVLS clear gloss and 10 parts 4011 reducer. So I'm just going to start off by adding about 10 drops to this mix, and then we'll just adjust it as I go, which is nice. So meaning adjusting, if I start spraying and it's not quite spraying smoothly, I'll add a little bit more reducer clear mix. If it's just not covering, then I'll just add a little bit more paint. All right, that looks good. The fun part. So like I said, this is it's not super terribly exciting. And a lot of this painting is going to be just freehand airbrushing, and there'll be a lot of stencil work too as I kind of tighten things up, but a lot of the block-in part of it is just kind of done freehand. So I talk about that 4050 a lot, the UVLS clear, which I'll put a link in the description too. This is what it is: UVLS gloss clear, and it's the 4050. So there are 3 different versions of this same product. One is gloss, one is satin, and one is matte. The gloss doesn't have any, basically they add the matte and satin additives to get this to work, but this is the base raw kind of product, which is nice. So this is the one I use for all the the additives. It also makes a nice, it's meant as a clear, so it works really well as that too, but I find I use it way more as an additive than a clear. It just smooths out the paint. Burnt umber and raw umber and all the earthy tones have heavy pigments in them, and they don't really want to spray very well. But this really smooths it out for these tiny details. It just allows this paint to really just flow really nicely. So one of the other reasons that I mix up the 4050 mix separately than the I don't do it all in the cup. Like if I'm mixing a color, I'll mix the color first in the cup or in a cup on the side, and then I'll add the 4050 to it. And the reason why is the UVLS has a kind of a, well, not kind of, it has a very blue tint to it. And actually it's a neat blue haze, so when you're actually spraying it on as a clear, you spray it on and you can see that blue haze, and then when that haze disappears, you know it's curing, so it disappears to a crystal clear when it's done curing. But that blue haze, whatever that is, that does that in the UVLS, also affects the color of the wet paint. It makes it look a lot lighter than it is. So see how tan that looks? But when I put that down, see how rich brown that looks? Once it dries, all that blueness disappears and it turns back into the original color. So to save yourself a lot of aggravation, like if you were to mix that, say, oh, that color is way too light, that's not gonna work. It's totally different when it dries, you know? So I try to make a habit of mixing, you know, a specific color without any of the 40-50 in it. So I'm just kind of roughly, I mean, I don't have to, but you know, I have the information there, so I'm roughly following the details of the HD stencil that left behind. There's going to be a lot of blue added on top of this, which is that steel reflection type. You know, if you think of like like just a piece of steel that's been outside or that has an area that's been worn, you know, kind of smooth. It has that bluish, just kind of grayish cast to it. So the fender has that all going all over it on the top. So a lot of the top side of the fender is going to be blue, but it has you can see the rust undercoat. So that's kind of what I'm putting in now. I'm just kind of getting in those base details, even though, you know, you could block this all in with one color and just kind of pick around with it, but I'm gonna kind of do it all at once. Again, I don't know where this saying came from, and I don't know why it's a saying, but there are many ways to skin a cat. So I don't know who's out there skinning cats or if that was a thing, but you get the idea. And again, this painting is such a, you know, it's, when I talk about paintings that I do, and whether they're like, I call them like full boat paintings, you know, paintings that I take all the way to like as far as I can go, technically and ability-wise and all that. The one thing I find is the big thing among all of it is just time invested. You know, it's like, how much time are you going to put in to really make sure that everything is perfect? And that's the biggest corner cut. You know, if you set time limits for yourself, or if you have to get it done within a certain amount of time, things got to go. You know, and it's not necessarily, you know, super important things, but things got to go if you have to get it done in a certain amount of time. Well, this painting and any of the, like I said, full boat paintings, I take that off myself. So it doesn't matter how long it's going to take me. I just want everything that I can possibly pull off to be exactly right, or as best as I can do. And that changes the complexion. I was fortunate to meet Charlie Hutton recently, and Charlie had just he was in an interview, and he had a great quote that I just couldn't get out of my head, and it's perfect. And he was talking about how blessed he is to be in the position that he is. And it's, you know, Charlie has certainly earned it with the quality and skill of his work, but he has kind of put himself in a position where, and this is what he said, I'm blessed that I have clients that allow me to do my best work. And when you think about that, that's really something else. You know, we're always looking for, if you're doing this for a living, we're always looking for, you know, our customers, what our perfect client would be, our perfect collector. And Charlie's point was the collector that allows him to put his foot to the floor, you know, to really just give everything he's got without restrictions, produces the kind of work that Charlie produces, that super, super high-end, absolutely perfect work. So the obvious thing with that is, if you're doing it for someone else or for a living, that translates into what the client or the collector has for a budget. the client has a real small budget, they can't afford to have you do every possible thing you could possibly do, you know? So that was what he was saying. He was blessed that he's in a position now where he has clients and collectors that just say, get it done the best you can do. And that's just something that I really like. I love the thought, you know, I love that that's really it. And yeah, it's our goal to really find that patron that will set us free, that will let us do exactly, like, just go all the way. There is no corners, you know. It's like you get it done. So there's today's rant while I paint brown. Not really rant, it was more like a observation, I guess. Alright, so as I kind of tuck in this brown in this area, the yellow needs to stay, but the yellow is really a base coat. It's really, that was the base coat for this area. So I can paint the brown in a lot of this area right here, but I need to make sure I leave little bits and pieces of that yellow showing through. And while the airbrush is great at putting down really controlled, fine layers of paint, it's also really good at covering everything. Like if you get into it and you back this thing up, I can hose this down with brown and I would lose a lot of that subtle yellow. So I want to be careful not to do that. Just want to kind of take it real slow and keep like leaning back, or if you're working a lot larger, step away from the canvas or board or whatever you're working on, and make sure while you're kind of picking at the details, you're keeping the whole thing in mind. You know, you just keep backing up and making sure you're kind of on the right track. And it's this layering too that really, for me, does a great job at really making this painting, or any painting really. When you see these paintings live, they have a whole different look than when they're photographed or online. And I like to call it the stained glass effect. And that's really what it is. Now, what's happening is the light's kind of going through these transparent layers of paint, hitting the surface and then bouncing back through all those layers of paint. So even though some of it's going to be opaque, a lot of it is not. You'll see a lot of very subtle transitions of light kind of bouncing around in there, and that gives this whole painting this amazing depth when you see it live, which unfortunately doesn't translate with a photograph. The photograph just by default will just kind of flatten everything out. But it's a really nice thing, and it's one of my favorite. You know, when someone notices that, you know, when they would say something like, "Oh, you know, your paintings look totally different live than they do, you know, online or in prints or in photographs," and that's a great compliment. That's also that's really what it is to have actual paint. You know what I mean? It's like those layers. Again, it's subtle and it's imperceptible, but it registers to people, even people who aren't, you know, seasoned veteran art critics or look at a lot of art. It's just something that people will pick up on automatically. It's really neat. Isn't it fun painting rust? So we'll see. Like I said, I say it all the time. You know, I do these live videos and demos and all this fun stuff. And I always, like, the anxiety level rises because I feel like people want to see, we live in a society that's instant, you know. People want to see that 30-second video or that 10-second TikTok or whatever, and it's like, boom, it's done. So we get into stuff like this, and it is the polar opposite of that. And, you know, I'm hoping that, you know, people will kind of enjoy this journey and kind of see what's involved with something like this, where I can't do this I mean, I suppose I could do this on a live stream, but, you know, people are people, and we've been programmed to want all our information instantly, so people get, you know, the attention span, I guess, is a little bit less than it used to be. So for that, I thank you all for hanging in with these open studios. They're a blast for me, and I hope you guys enjoy them too, guys and girls, of course. So you got to get an idea of how nicely this stuff sprays when it's all reduced and clear added and all that fun stuff. You do get tip dry. There's no way around it. So it's a constant thing, and I do it, without even thinking about it. It's been, just been so long for airbrushing that to say that, you have a paint or an airbrush or whatever that doesn't have any tip dry is impossible, because if that was true, the paint would never dry on the surface either. So it's got to dry somewhere, and it always tends to dry in the needle because that's where the least amount of paint is and the most amount of air. So it is what it is. So it's just, like I said, it's just dealing with it. Now, when it's excessive, that's a whole different thing. White, for instance, opaque white, well, you can watch it clump up on the end of the needle. But again, if you're trying to do detail with it, with the Wicked line, that detail opaque white, I mean, that you can reduce that amazingly a lot without having it break down. But you can also add 40, 50 to it as well, and I've done that a lot. So again, it makes it more transparent, which if you're looking for coverage, you don't want to, it's not going to really do the job for you unless you're patient. You can let it build up. But if you're looking to put in really tight white details, it's a great way to go, So what I'll do on the next episode, because, well, yeah, I'll do it on the next episode. Because it'll be more of the same as I kind of crawl through all this. Like when I do the actual wheel hub here, I'll zoom in on this so you guys will get right in on that. Where now you just kind of get the general overview of the whole thing as I'm working on it. So I don't know if I might hit this with UVLS satin. That's what's, if I tilt this, you can see the satin glare of this a little bit. See it on the, yeah, there it is. So all that bit of sheen there, that's UVLS satin, and I did that after I did the background to kind of protect the corners, because from handling it, they're going to get rubbed off a little bit. So having a little bit of clear on there resists that. But what I'll also do sometimes, if I get to a point in a painting where everything, like if this is all done, this wheel is done, and I really want to protect this as well, I would hit it again with a little bit of satin. But I try not to do too much of that because I don't want a gigantic build of that. It's clear. It is very clear. But, if just out of archival, paranoia, the less of that clear for me, the better, because you don't have any buildup at all, regardless of, how the clear is really. Again, this area up here is mostly like that light steel blue, so I want to kind of, you can actually see it up in the reference here. That handlebar right there is steel, but see how blue it is up there? So that's kind of what the front fender is without having to move all the cameras and stuff. All right, since that's pretty close, get everything here. There's some nice, really nice, like just open, rusty spots. So there, those ones like right here and through here. I'm really going to make sure I have enough of this brown built up, because there are lighter parts, like kind of yellowish parts of the oxidation, and darker parts that kind of all sit on top of that. So I want to make sure I got plenty of that brown as a good base. All right. So again, there's lots of ways to do this. I could do this over the entire painting, this color, just kind of work this layer over the entire painting. But for this, because this is such a long and involved painting, what I'll probably do is I'll probably finish the wheel. I'll do everything on the wheel. That does a couple things. One, it keeps me engaged in the painting. If I have to do the same thing over the entire painting for days and days, I don't care how much you love painting. For me, it starts to, it starts to become monotonous, and I want to do something different. So it solves that because I'll be able to move on to the other thing. But it also will teach me what to do in the rest of the painting. So this becomes a little microcosm of the whole image. I'll work out all the details or the steps it'll take to get the rest of the painting to where it's going to be, and then when I get to the rest of the painting, I've already done it. So it works two ways for that. Again, there are a million ways to do it. You could do the whole image with the brown, and that would work out great. Again, it's really just the kind of mood that I'm in, I guess. So in this case, I know that this is a long haul, and I'll feel really good and excited when this part is completely done. It'll just fire me up to get the rest of it done. All right, so this strut here is just completely rusted. I mean, it's not pitted. It is pitted, but there's no paint on it. So I'm just gonna kind of base this whole thing in. And again, there's no need for a shield here, because this is as long as I don't, blow this up everywhere. But this brush and the way the paint is reduced, I'm able to really kind of keep that under control. So I could use a freehand, a straight edge or something, but when things are working well, there's not a whole lot of need for it. When I tighten this up in the end, there's a nice dark shadow along this edge. Then I'll use a straight edge for that. I want that really nice and crisp. I love it. At the end of this strut, there is some sort of, it's probably stainless. It's brand new looking bolt right on the end. So I'll probably age that a little bit, since obviously they did it because, it looks like this bike actually, I'm sure it runs. So I'm sure there are parts of it that need to be structurally okay. I was at a big car show a couple weeks ago, and there was an early 60s T-Bird, and it was all rat rotted. I mean, it was all rusty, and obviously it was taken care of, but it was intentionally left unpainted and natural or whatever. And there's a vinyl sticker across the inside front windshield that said, yes, this is mine, and no, I'm not painting it. So I thought that was great. So down in here, there's a lot of black and blue, but there is hints of that brown here and there. So again, I use this as the base for that, just to kind of tuck them in. A little bit of yellow going on in there too, only because it looks like some sort of, again, oxidation or something. It doesn't look like paint. So before I get too far in that area, I'll jump back to that yellow and just kind of tuck them in too. But for the meantime, I'll keep going. That's the tire, so I don't want to do that. Another strut down here, but it's very blue. And then the cables for the brakes. The actual rotor here looks blue as well, so I'm not going to do anything with that. This strut over here should be brown. It's pretty dark, so I'm gonna give it a base of brown anyway. And again, here you got the few indications of spokes. I can try to save them, but at this point, I think I'm just gonna kind of use the stencils to lay out all the spokes again. I'm just going to kind of put a little layer of brown right here. Actually, this bottom of this fender is really rusty. I missed all this. So this is all kinds of texture in it too. So a couple things I missed, and I'm disappointed that I did. There's a couple little nibs in the either in the UVLS or in the base coat. I would have liked to have taken those out before I got this far, because those will show up in the clear too. So I might do a little bit of repair work on that in the next video as well before I get too far on. I'm going to show you how I deal with that. And like I said, that disappoints me because I should have taken care of that right at the beginning when they popped up. And that just takes looking at it, you know, when I sprayed either the UVLS, if that's in the UVLS, which would be nice. But if that happened in the base coat, you know, on this whole thing, then I should have gotten that out. There's a few more other ones too that I could have got to, which again, it's not a huge deal, but in the end, when I clear this, it'll be super smooth, and then you'll see the bump, you know, that little hair or whatever that is. And that's, for me, that's distracting, just because I know people are going to be right on top of this thing. They're going to be looking right at it, and if you see a big fat hair, you know, in there, that's lame. Again, no corners, you know, there's no corners cut. All right, so this back of the fender is it's not very, well, it is very brown. Now this one here, I'm going to cut out a template for this, because this has got, it's dark back here, but it's also got this nice sharp edge, and it's against the background. So actually, you know what I'll do now? I'll wait. I'm going to, I'll just get the base in, and then I'll tighten it up. I think that's probably a better way to go. Now this paint in the cup is starting to set up, meaning it's starting to dry in the cup. And that's just what it does. Again, that's where we ask paint to do. It's stay wet for a little while and then dry up for me, and stay, you know, super like, don't reactivate, that kind of thing. So it's going to do that no matter where it is. So it's going to set up on the cup. It's going to obviously dry on the canvas, on the board. So I can tell it's starting to set up because it's not spraying as well. It starts to like kind of skip and clump. So I'm going to, which is perfect timing because the end of this episode is coming up. So this will give me a chance to clean out this brush in the next episode and do that repair, and, you know, then jump back to the brown. So again, that's why I only put a few drops of paint in there. You can put, you know, there are covers, caps that they make for these airbrushes too. But don't forget, there's a ton of air in the cup, and it's drawing air in even with the cap. So paint's going to dry. It just is what it is. So by limiting the amount of paint I put in there, I limit the loss of paint. Like if it started to do this and I had a whole cup of paint, I'd have to dump all that out. Because I don't know, I have terrible luck adding more reducer to it. Just because what's happening is the paint is doing what it's supposed to do. Everything is evaporating out. The water, the solvents that they use, or whatever they put into it, basically. So just simply adding reducer for me doesn't seem to have it react the same way. You know, it just doesn't spray the same way anymore. So if you just put a few drops of paint in there, you're not losing anything. And like I said, I have it all mixed up, so it's not like I have to remix it, you know, or, you know, actually make that color again, which is nice. That's good. And it's moving faster than I thought. What do you know? All right. A little bit more on this one, and then for the next episode we'll do those couple quick repairs on these nibs, which will be nice. Again, get them out of the way now, and then I don't have to worry about them. Where if the whole painting's done and then I try to take care of it, that's, you know, there's a lot more chance things can go wrong. All right, so let me back you guys up or show you where we're at. But yeah, it's coming together quick. Now you're starting to get that feel for that texture and the rust and everything, so it's gonna be a fun painting. All right, so for Steve Leahy and Open Studio, thanks for joining me for this episode, and jump back next week and we'll get the next episode on. If you enjoyed this, please consider liking and subscribing and letting all your friends know, and that's great, and I will see you guys next time. Thanks a lot.